You know when someone you care about just stops explaining themselves? It's so easy to think they've stopped caring. It can feel like you're getting this silent treatment, a cold shoulder, or maybe even like they're trying to manipulate you. But what if it's something else entirely? For a lot of people, silence isn't a weapon at all. It's a survival response. It's not some empty void, but a room just crowded with unexpressed thoughts, a sign of a nervous system trying desperately to find its way back to safety. So, the big question is this silence a weapon? Is it meant to punish? And while, yeah, sometimes it can be, that is rarely the whole story. What if what we see as an attack is actually a really desperate form of defense? Let's explore that idea for a bit. Well, psychology actually shows us that for many, silence isn't an act of aggression at all. It's an act of protection. It's a shield that goes up when emotions get way too overwhelming to handle. So it's less about pushing you away and so much more about them trying to hold themselves together. To really get this, we have to look past the social stuff and dig into our biology, because a lot of the time, this isn't a conscious choice somebody's making. It's a biological override, a reaction that's wired deep, deep inside our nervous system. And this brings us to a really key concept, the freeze response. When emotional input gets too intense, a conflict, a misunderstanding, or just sensory overload, the nervous system can literally shut down to try and regain control. In that moment, finding the words to speak can feel physically impossible because the brain is prioritizing internal safety over social interaction. Right, we all know about fight or flight. You either confront a threat or you run from it. But freeze is the third and often forgotten response. It's not about fighting or fleeing the other person. It's about shutting down to protect yourself from any more emotional harm. It is, at its very core, a survival mechanism. But why do some people freeze when others fight or flee? Well, this response is often conditioned by our life experiences. So let's dive into the 6 key reasons this becomes a learned behavior for so many. Okay, so here we go. These are the 6 core reasons that silence can transform from just an absence of words into a necessary survival skill. And you'll see each one kind of builds on the last, creating this really powerful psychological pattern. Let this quote sink in for a second. When effort doesn't lead to change, the brain starts to adapt. It begins to see communication as wasted energy. Just imagine trying over and over and over to get through to someone with absolutely no result. Your brain is built for efficiency. It's not going to keep spending energy on something that just doesn't work. And this is where it starts for so many people, a history of emotional invalidation. If you grew up in a home where your feelings were always dismissed or ignored or judged, your brain learned a really powerful lesson. Speaking up only leads to disappointment. So what happens? Silence becomes the safer, more reliable option to avoid that pain. Now, this might sound like a total contradiction, but it is so key. The person who goes silent isn't someone who doesn't value words. In fact, they're often someone who values them so much that they're terrified of their power to cause damage. And that brings us right to our second reason. They're trying to protect the relationship. When you feel emotions that intensely, you know the risk of saying something you can never take back. In that context, silence isn't coldness at all. It's a powerful form of self-control. It's a choice to handle the storm inside rather than risk damaging a connection you really, truly value. This quote, wow, it just speaks to such a deep sense of exhaustion, doesn't it? It's that moment when explaining yourself feels more painful than just living with the problem. You've already played the whole scene out in your head, and you know exactly how it's going to end. And this, right here, is what we call communication burnout. You see, you didn't start out silent. You probably spent years explaining and clarifying. But when you realize that all your effort doesn't change the patterns and your boundaries are still being crossed, well, the motivation to speak just disappears. You hit a point where sacrificing your own peace is just not an option anymore. This next reason, it's about a role some people are kind of forced into way too early in life. It's that role where your own needs have to come second just to keep the peace for everyone else. If you were the strong one growing up, you learned really fast to hide your vulnerability to avoid being a burden. So, as an adult, that pattern of self-reliance becomes your default. You instinctively believe that managing your pain all by yourself is what keeps everything and everyone stable. And so, you stay quiet. Just think about the experience this quote is describing. For some people, the world is just processed at a higher volume. Social interactions aren't simple. They're these complex layers of data, and all of it needs to be sorted through. For these individuals, their internal world is just louder. During a conflict, they aren't just processing what's happening in that moment. They're analyzing every tiny nuance. Silence gives them the mental space they need to sort through all that social noise without the added pressure of having to perform or respond right away. And this brings us right to our final reason. When the outside world feels chaotic and unpredictable, we all look for a place where we feel safe. And for some of us, that place isn't a location, it's a state of being. Your silence becomes your sanctuary. It's the one environment where you get to set the rules. Nobody can misinterpret your words, nobody can judge your tone, or demand access to your emotions. In a world that can feel so emotionally expensive, this withdrawal is a profound act of self-preservation. So when we look at all these reasons together, the behavior takes on a completely new meaning, right? It stops being about judgment and starts being about empathy. It's about reframing this silence not as coldness, but as what it really is, self-preservation. If any of this resonates with you, I mean really resonates, please hear this. Nothing about you is broken. This response isn't a flaw in your character, it's a testament to what you have survived. And that's the crucial point, isn't it? Needing distance doesn't make you cold. It means you've hit your limit, and you're finally listening to what your nervous system needs to feel safe again. Your silence is just a sign that you value peace more than forced connection. And hey, if you love someone who goes silent, the answer isn't to push them for words, it's to create safety. Don't apply pressure. Offer space. Your goal is to show them that your presence is a safe harbor, not another storm to weather. Because ultimately the goal isn't to stay silent forever. It's to find the people who make it feel safe enough to speak again. The people who listen without judgment and who offer understanding instead of demands. So I guess the real question is, can you be that person for someone in your life?